I've been getting a lot of questions about my code's giving me an error, how can I fix it? So in this video, I will teach you how to fix your code and how to be a better programmer in general. Well, step one of fixing your code is first you gotta read your exception. And this is something from the slides that I strongly disagree with, but in the slides, they tell you to, whenever you get an exception, they tell you to do system.out.println and then the name of the exception plus exception.getMessage. Now this thing in itself is fine, it gives you the exception, it gives you the message, but the problem is it doesn't show you the stack trace, and that's not very good when it comes to debugging. All right. So without a stack trace, how do you know where this exception comes from? It doesn't show you the line number. It just shows you an error message. Like, you know what it is, but you don't know where it's happening. And this is kind of, I don't like this for two reasons. All right. The first one is that it's bad for debugging, as I just said, because it doesn't tell you anything. And the second one is it's bad for production too, because you don't want the users just to see some exception message. You want to translate that programmer talk into something more user-friendly that any layman can understand. So doing e.getMessage really is a poor way of handling exceptions. Plus, you're not really handling the exception. You're just printing the stack trace. Actually, no, never mind. Not even the stack trace. You're just printing the message. And I think that's pointless. And what you can do is, since nobody's going to use your homework ever, except for the graders, feel free just to e.print stack trace. It's going to make things a lot easier for you because the stack trace actually shows you which line is causing the exception, and you can go and fix it, instead of just having a super vague error message and you don't know where it's coming from. And then the second thing I want to talk about, how you can become a better programmer, is to read the stack trace. I can't stress this enough. Read the stack trace, because the stack trace is only there to help you determine what the root cause of this exception is. Now, a lot of people, they don't read the stack trace. They just post whatever they have, or they just give it to me and then tell me that their code doesn't work. Well, sometimes the reasons are really obvious, because the stack trace literally tells you what's wrong with your code and where the exception happens, at what line, in what file, and it's very detailed. So you should really take a look at that and inspect your own code before you... I'm not saying that you shouldn't ask me questions. I'm just saying that it saves time for both you and me. So, you don't have to wait for me to reply to your message or email, whatever. And you can just keep going with your project. And usually when you see the stack trace, some people get discouraged when they read the first line. Oh, it's some built-in class in Java. Or it's some source file or some compiled class file from some jar I imported. So I didn't write that, so I don't know how to fix it. Now that's the issue. So what the stack trace does is that, as the name says, it traces your exception backwards. So it shows what's causing what and what's causing what and what's causing the exception eventually. And you can there's usually going to be 10, 20 lines when it comes to the stack trace. But in those 10 and 20 lines, you're always going to see, the stack trace is always going to pass through one of the files that you wrote and one of the lines that you wrote. And that's what causes the exception. So don't just think that, oh, I don't know what this is. This is all like, I don't recognize any of the files. Just look closer. Within the stack trace, you can actually see that, okay, this is caused by, this is in the middle, that's caused by something that I did, and I can fix it. I can probably fix it. And the third point is that when it comes to how to fix your code, how to get better at fixing your code, is that use the debugging feature in Eclipse. Eclipse is an IDE, and the point of having an IDE is not to just check your syntax for you and not just to compile your stuff for you. But the most important thing about an IDE is that it gives you the ability to debug your code. You can set breakpoints. So what breakpoints are, they're basically, so let's say you set a breakpoint on line 7, all right? So what happens is that when the program starts executing and it gets to that line 7 that you set a breakpoint on, the program's going to pause. And you can choose to advance line by line, or you can go into some function, or you can skip out of that function. But the great thing about the debugger is that you can also see all the variables and what their values are at every single line as the program progresses. So it's an invaluable tool for debugging, to figuring out why is my program acting weird, and why isn't something working. And it's very annoying that they don't teach you that in class. They never taught you that. I mean, 103, 104, you just used, I don't know, Sublime. I hate Sublime. Or Visual Studio Code. But the point is, they never taught you how to use an IDE and how to take advantage of the modern tools. And of course, being able to write 100% accurate code in a notepad is good. I mean, it's good for interviews, because sometimes they ask you to write code on the fly during interviews on a piece of paper, on a whiteboard or something, and you don't have an IDE to check your syntax for you. But the thing is, we aren't usually that good. As I was saying, the point is, when you're still an undergraduate student, when you're still learning new stuff, that's not the point. The point is to learn new things. And this process of constantly writing your code in Notepad, compiling it, and then the compiler finds some syntax error or something in your code, like, this is just a waste of time. It's a complete waste of time. You're wasting your time on something that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter for now. It's not important. The important thing is how to use the code, how to build things with it for now. I mean, you can practice your handwriting code skills later on when you're prepping for an interview, or when you're doing leak code. But that's not the point right now. The point right now is to write code, to learn about data structures, or to learn about like how to write serverless web servers, multi-threading. And writing code is just a way of getting to that knowledge, of using it. Writing the code isn't the point. So don't waste so much time on writing code. Just use an IDE and make full use of the IDE. Don't just use it as some kind of syntax checker, or don't just use it so that you click a button and it runs. Also use it for debugging when your program, something goes wrong with your program. Like when you segfault in C, I used to use C-line in 104, and it helped me a lot, because as I was typing code, instead of going online and looking for all the methods that I can use on the map or on the vector, I'll just type in the dot, and it gives me a list of methods I can use, and I can just choose from it. It saved me so much time. And did I learn anything less? No. I only benefited from using the IDE. I did not have any disadvantage whatsoever with the IDE. And when I get a seg fault, I can just run it in debug, and it shows me which line am I having the seg fault. I didn't learn any less because I used an IDE. If not, I learned more about how my program worked, how my program behaved. I didn't just write a bunch of random code and it just worked, and I was like, oh shit, it worked. So, I don't want to touch it because it worked. I don't know how it works, but it works. That's like the worst kind of thing that you can do, is to write a bunch of code or copy it from Stack Overflow, and you don't know how it works, but you put it into a project anyways, and you didn't learn anything. And that's the fourth point that I want to say. When you copy code from Stack Overflow, when you reference code from somewhere else, sure, you can do that. That's a part of the learning process, and that's actually how software engineering works in general. I mean, when you don't know how to do something, you look it up, you look at how other people do it. But the thing is, you have to understand how other people achieved it before you just copied it into your own code base or something. Like, I don't suggest copying other people's code at all. What I suggest is that you look at their code, and then you put it side by side with your code, and then you re-implement the same logic, but in your own code. Like, you have to type it. And that gives you a learning experience. And that's the same reason why for midterm or final exams, we give you an option to have cheat sheets or note sheets. But they have to be handwritten, because if you just print everything out with a computer, first, you can just print in some super high resolution and bring a magnifier. That would be unfair. And secondly, you're not learning when you're just copying and pasting stuff. We want you to write it by hand because when you're copying it down, it goes through your brain, hopefully, and you learn something from it. Maybe something clicks when you're copying it. Maybe you see it differently the second time you're copying the code. And the fifth point I want to make is learn how to Google. Now, this seems really obvious and trivial, but Googling is a necessary skill when it comes to anything, actually. But you'll be surprised how many people don't know how to use Google properly. Let's say you're working on some SQL database, and you're not sure how foreign keys work. So what are you going to put into the Google search query? Some people, they're going to put how to use foreign keys in SQL table. Now, that's not a good way of Googling stuff. The better way of searching things up is to type foreign key SQL tutorial. That's going to give you many more results. And because if you type a question like how to use foreign key in a SQL table, you're only going to get the results where other people are asking the same question. And usually when I post a tutorial or anyone posts a tutorial, they're not going to have they're not going to have a question as their title. Their title is not going to say, this is how you use foreign keys in SQL tables. It's just going to say foreign key SQL tutorial or something like that. So you got to search with keywords instead of complete sentences. And before you ask me any questions, because many times on then, what happens is that someone posts a question and I would just Google that problem. Because, I don't know everything. Like, half of the stuff that I know comes from Google. It's not like that I've seen every single problem that's ever happened in 201. I don't know half of them, but I Google. And usually the first Stack Overflow result has the answer. And I just paraphrase that answer and feed it back to you. Now, is that fine? That's totally fine, because it's a part of my job to answer your questions. But what I'm saying is that once you leave the class, or, it takes time for me to, what if I miss your email? And you're going to be stuck with that simple question for like 12 hours or something. Or what if after you leave 201 and after you leave school, nobody's going to be there to answer every single of your questions. So you got to learn how to Google properly. It saves you time and it prepares you better for the future. Now, some of you might find this to be really obvious, but this is actually, you'd be surprised how many people don't know how to use Google properly. Now, these are my 5 tips when it comes to how to fix your code and be a better programmer in general. Multi-threading videos coming up shortly. And thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye-bye.